So, some of you know Terry. Well, currently she, as I said, is our Texas House Representative. She is a longtime resident of Irving. She represents District 105, which mostly is Irving now, because it got redistricted. She is a proud graduate of Irving High, and she commuted from Irving the entire time she was getting all of her higher education at the UT, at University of Texas at Arlington, University of Dallas, and the Texas Wesleyan University Law School. She has also been a nonprofit director, overseeing programs in economic development, small and minority business assistance, neighborhood revitalization, historic preservation, workforce development, and job placement. And before she served in the legislature, she operated her own solo law firm for 20 years. Currently, in the 2023 legislative session, she served on the Environmental Regulation Committee and the International Relations and Economic Development Committee. And she has been honored with several community awards, the Hunger Leadership Award from Feeding America for her work on the Human Services Committee at the state level in the 86th legislature, the 2019 Community Service Award from the American Muslim Women Physician Association, and the 2020 Dr. Mae Jackson Outstanding Democratic Woman Office Holder Award. And she still lives in Irving with a former neighbor from Austin, her cat, KK. So, at this point, I'm going to let Terry take over the podium.
Thank you. I joined a group that was actually in Fort Worth. I saw on a morning talk show named the Hispanic Women's League. And while I was there was a woman named Alice, and she said, you need to join the League of Women Voters. This was in the late 70s. People my age didn't join League of Women Voters, didn't join any groups at all, I don't think. Usually you're older when you start joining civic groups. But anyway, I joined the League of Women Voters back when they had units. So my unit was going to the annual meeting, and while we were in the car drive over, I said, the League of Women Voters needs to do something to attract more minority women. We have all these good issues that we study, like public transit, public housing. Our issues and our positions are good positions, but they just have more credibility or weight to them if they included minorities in the position. And they said, oh, we already tried that. Minorities don't want to belong to the League of Women Voters. Oh, okay. So we got to the annual meeting, and I went to Alice, and I said, Alice McGinnis, but she was actually Mexicana. So I went to Alice and I said, I want to make this proposal about an initiative to attract minority women. If I make the motion, will you second it? And she said, yes, I will. So I said, okay, and I went back and sat down. And then I got up and I went over to Marty, who was the parliamentarian. And I said, Marty, if I want to make a motion, where's the right place in the agenda to do that? So she looked down the agenda and she went, right here, this would be the right time to say it. Because sometimes you got a good idea, but if you make it at the wrong time, then people get mad at you because you're not following rules or something. So I went back and sat down. Then I got up and I went over to Chris, who was she was a former state rep there in Tarrant County. And I said, Chris, I want to make this motion. Alice is going to second it. Marty said for me to make it during this time on the agenda. If I make the motion, would you speak to it? And she said, yes, I would. So it came that time on the agenda, and much to the surprise of my car mates that I carpooled over there with, I guess I'm lucky I got a ride back home. But anyway, so I stood up and said, I move that we do a special initiative to attract minority members to the League of Women Voters. Then Alice stood up and said, I second it. And And then Chris stood up and spoke to it, and my car mates are like, what just happened? And as my reward for that, they made me membership chair. So that was my first, that's what happens, warning, when you speak up and something. Like, oh, good, you like that idea? You're now in charge of it. So we had created a North Side unit in Fort Worth, which you know that's heavily Mexican-American neighborhood. And then we created a Southeast unit around Stop 6, which is a predominantly black neighborhood. So we had those two units. So it's a little bit like segregation, but anyway, you have units by neighborhoods, and the good thing about that was that it empowered those women to take control over their unit, and so they liked that part of it. So I'm kind of, that's one of the first things I did in the League of Women Voters. And then when I was, because I was membership chair, I was in charge of attracting speakers for the annual meeting, and we were sitting around in a regular board meeting talking about who we could invite, and they were naming people I'd never heard of, but they had maybe good positions, like they were assistant district attorney or something. Well, do we know how well are they a good speaker? Has anybody ever heard them speak? No, we just hired for women who had good positions and good titles. Well, why don't we get a named person? Terry, we don't have any money. Oh, okay. Well, I called Sarah Weddington. Anybody know who Sarah Weddington is? I called Sarah Weddington and I asked her if she would come speak. And she said, because I said, well, if you call people in government, frequently they have budgets to pay for these things, and you don't have to worry about paying for everything. They've got budgets for that. So I called her and asked her if she would come speak, and she said, you know, League of Women Voters is one of my favorite organizations. Yes, I'd love to come. And so then she asked about how much money we had in the budget, and I said, oh, I hate to tell you, we really don't have very much money. And she said, well, give me a ballpark figure. I said, I don't think we're even in your ballpark. So she said, well, can you do it so that I'm not paying to go there? Can you do my travel and lodging? And without even having asked the board before, I said, yes, we can do that. So we had Sarah Weddington for one of our speakers. Kind of cool. She gave me the resume to introduce her, and I didn't want to do the usual just going down the resume stuff. So I asked her, when you were in Washington, what did you miss the most about Texas? And she said, I missed barbecue, Tex-Mex food, and country western music. That was like over 40 years ago, and I still remember that. And we also had Sissy Farrenthal. So sometimes it helps to think big. We attracted some good people, so I'm very proud of that history with the League of Women Voters, and proud to be with the League of Women Voters in Irving. And proud to be state rep for Irving. We're still in special session. This is our third special session. We are being held hostage. Hello, Facebook Live. I just said we were held hostage. We kind of like being held hostage because the governor has said that he will keep calling a special session until he gets what he wants. So each time that we tell him no, he says, okay, another special session. So you may or may not know that the governor is the only person who can call a special session. We can't do that. Governor can. And once he calls a special session, he's the only one who can say, or she, is the only one who can say what's on the agenda. If we propose anything that's not on the agenda, it's ruled out as a point of order against the rules, not on the agenda. So, for that reason, we're going back again. Now I'm hooking this into what we're going to talk about today with the constitutional amendments. The speaker told us Wednesday, he said, be sure and early vote, like Ernestine said, except he had a different reason. He said, be sure and early vote because we're going to be back here on November the 7th. We're not passing vouchers in the House. Yay, House. For those of you who are opposed to vouchers, maybe some of you like them, but anyway, in the House, we're opposed to vouchers. The Senate has passed them, the Senate can do that, but the House is not. We have a combination of urban Democrats together with rural Republicans who like our public schools, and we're supporting them, and so we've already said no in regular session. So I don't mind going back to Austin, I don't mind going to special session. What I do mind is being asked to come back to vote on something we've already voted on, and we've already said what our position is, and we're being called back and saying, now you can vote again. I said, okay, you can vote again, but our answer is still no. So we have a version in the House, not exactly something that I wrote up or would have written up, but we have a version in the House that does not agree with what the governor wants, and so that one's not moving through to the floor for a vote, and so it's unlikely there will not be any vote on vouchers on the House floor, I don't believe, this session, this special session. However, we did vote on a lot of anti-immigrant bills on Wednesday. We started out on Wednesday morning. We were voting on things like smuggling, building a wall, topics like that. So the discussion went into the afternoon and into the evening, and we had a verbal fight on the House floor, and so we adjourned for 3 hours. It was supposed to be for 1 hour, but it turned into 3. And part of the reason why was because they were negotiating in the back rooms, negotiating to say that, okay, we can combine these amendments that we wanted to propose. We can have only one speaker instead of 2 and 3 on this topic. And so I thought that was positive, that it was moving forward, that we were going to do these amendments and that we would be reconvening to consider those. And then it just blew up. After 3 hours of negotiating, it blew up because the people on the other side of the issue said, oh, we found out we don't have the support of the governor for this. The governor doesn't approve. You mean you've been negotiating in bad faith? We've been here for 3 hours thinking we were negotiating in good faith and you don't have authority? Nope, we don't have authority. My first thought, not being a government major or anything, was that I thought we had three branches of government. So sometimes it doesn't feel that way. So that we didn't finish voting on all that until technically Thursday morning. This is one meeting, started on Wednesday morning. It went past midnight, didn't go into morning as in dawn, but past midnight when we finally finished voting on all that. So if I sound a little tired, that's why I haven't really quite recuperated from all that. And we'll be going back again soon. But we're here to talk about constitutional amendments. I'll also be glad to talk about anything in the special session after we talk about constitutional amendments. So if you have some questions about some other things, we can talk about those other things that you want to ask about. I did serve on Pub Ed last session, and I asked to be reappointed. I said that they needed a teacher on Pub Ed. And so Speaker Phelan appointed me last session, but he didn't reappoint me this session. And when I first found out about my assignments, I thought, did I say something wrong? Did I do a vote he didn't like? What's the reason why I didn't get reappointed? I was taking it very personal. And then when I saw who all was appointed to Pub Ed, I went, oh my gosh, they didn't appoint a lot of us, reappoint a lot of us back to Pub Ed. So this isn't personal, this is just a whole change up as we go into the next session. And once I didn't take it personal, I could be happy with the assignments that I got. On the constitutional amendments, I brought a handful on the back table. Does everybody have something? I noticed a lot of you have the League of Women Voters Guide, so that's good. And if you want to have something to follow along with and write on, there are some of these on the back table. The reproduction department, publication department, talked me into doing this as a one mailer. I had done it up as 2, but there was going to be a mailer that was this part, the legislative update, and then there was going to be a mailer that was this part, the constitutional amendments, and they said, we can combine it into one. And I wasn't sure whether that was a good idea or not. What do y'all think? Do you think it was a good idea to combine them into one? Okay. So proposed constitution, we've got like 14 constitutional amendments. I don't know if you studied in public school, I remember that I did, that we have hundreds and hundreds of constitutional amendments. Texas is really bad for amending the Constitution every time you turn around. Part of the reason why is that we really are changing in something in the Constitution, and a lot of the times it's simply that if you put it in the Constitution, it makes it harder to change it. And so a lot of the things that we vote on as constitutional amendments, we're doing it just because once we make it in a part of the Constitution, it makes it more difficult to change. Out of the 14, some seem kind of obvious, some less obvious, so we'll start talking about Proposition 1. Or we don't necessarily have to do them in order. We can do the ones that maybe are the easy ones first and then talk about the ones that need more discussion. Which way would you like to do it? Easy first? A lot of people consider Proposition number 2 one of the easy ones because it's about giving exemptions to taxes to child care facilities. Now, one of the good things about this one, in case you're not too sure about it, is that this is not required. The way it's written, it's not mandatory that child care facilities get a tax exemption. It's a may, not a shall. So if a local option exemption, that's why it's phrased that way, that a local area can choose to give a child care facility an exemption, but they don't have to, so it's a choice. And so I think if you have any concerns about that, maybe that part might help a little bit to be maybe more for it. Being on the Economic Development Committee, at first I was kind of surprised that we got bills about child care. And you may have already realized, but it took a little light to come on for me, that child care is workforce development. Child care is economic development. So that's another thing that's very important about this. We're having a problem with child care facilities staying open, especially after the pandemic, and they're having trouble hiring people. And so we don't want our child care facilities to close, because if they close, then there's a lot of families there that are hunting for someplace where their child can get good care while the family's working. So I'd say to say yes to Proposition 2. Did anybody want to discuss that? Is there anybody that has an opposing view that they want to make sure that we know about why it's not a good bill? Okay, if not, we'll skip on down to, Proposition 5 is another one, because it's for universities, and who could be against universities? This is related to the Texas University Fund, and it provides funding to institutions of higher ed so that they can achieve national prominence as a major research university. We didn't have too many in Texas. We're slowly growing to more of our major universities being considered major research universities, which is a very important difference between being a university and being a research university. So this is money for the Texas University Fund. You may have heard of this session. We had the unusual problem of having a surplus of money. Lots and lots of money. Okay, what are we going to do with this lots and lots of money? Oh, maybe we could fund health care and public education. Part of it was to give money back, because we had so much money, we just have to give some of it back. But another thought that I thought was an important thought was, when we have so much money, and you're thinking about where do we spend it, that a lot of thought was given to what are some major things that we can make this major one-time expenditure to that would be very important. And then we wouldn't have to worry if 5 years from now we don't have so much money. So they were very careful in appropriations to look for things that could be a one-time investment that would go into the future, and kind of being careful about making commitments this session that maybe future sessions would not be able to pay for. So this is one of those good ones of about a major investment in our universities. Proposition 6 is about water. For some reason, there's some people who have made this one's kind of a controversial issue. I think water is pretty important. We take it for granted, right? Because we can go over to our sink and we turn on the faucet and water comes out, and we don't worry about water. We're lucky that way. In Mexico, there can be water trucks going down the highway, and there'll be highway robbers that lie in wait for the water truck and jump out to rob water, because that's how valuable, important, and scarce it can be in some places, that highwaymen are actually robbing and stealing water tanks, water trucks. We haven't got to that point yet, But we like to brag in Texas about how many people are moving to Texas. Everybody wants to live in Texas. Look at all these people. We've got 3 million new people that come to the state of Texas. So far, I haven't seen any of them come bringing water with them. Have you? Nobody comes bringing water with them. I joked that I think I'll have to do a bill that says it requires if you can immigrate to Texas from whatever other state, but you cannot, or migrate, I should say, from any other state, but you have to come bringing some water because we don't have enough. There's going to be a time when it's going to be like, how are we going to provide water for all these people? And there's some entities that are already thinking about that. For the first time that I know of in the history of the state of Texas, we formed a water caucus. And so I had joined the water caucus. So this bill creates a water fund, a special fund, outside the general revenue fund to be administered by the Texas Water Development Board. I think some people have some concerns about the Texas Water Development Board. You have these things, you always have to have some board that's administering it, and you always have to have some faith or trust in that board, and sometimes some boards we have more faith and trust in than others. Is there anyone who wants to speak to why they think Proposition 6 is not a definite yes for water? Yes, ma'am.
I don't want to speak against it, but I was curious about what kind of budgets they intend to fund with it. Did they talk about that?
Yes, I heard, one of the things that I heard that I know affects most of us, if not all of us, and that is how badly our water system leaks. That it's unbelievable how much water we lose just from pipes, old pipes that we have, that have leaks in them. Like enough water to, they do numbers like, this is enough water to supply this city for this many days or something, the amount of water that we lose. And so, if we're concerned about water, one of the steps is to just conserve what we have. And so some of the money would go towards repairing all these old water lines. I think that's an important project and something that's doable, that helps everybody. So that would be one of the uses.
Yeah, like that big leak in Dallas that's been leaking for 2 years.
A big leak in Dallas that's been leaking for 2 years.
There's a big leak in Dallas that's been leaking for 2 years.
And what are they going to do about it?
Well, they're planning on what they're going to do about it.
Sounds like government. Okay. Well, you have to have a plan. I think it says here one of the concerns is that it says it doesn't count against the constitutional limit on the rate of growth of appropriations, so it's excluded from the appropriations. So,
That's good.
any other questions on Proposition 6?
But is there one reason I heard that, I'm okay, I'll talk about it.
And I can repeat the question.
They wanted is because of, like you said, more people are moving here and the water shortage could become a major reality. But others said we really don't have a water shortage and it's still under control. So which side is it? Which is correct? Is it concerned, you know?
I think if we don't do anything about it, we are going toward a water shortage.
Yeah.
And our extreme drought certainly didn't help any.
That's true.
And probably you had on the news here, just like they had in Austin, about how far down our lakes are. And we depend a lot on our lakes for water supply. Some of them are not just inches down, but a few feet down. And I'm saying this while we're having a rainy day, but so thank you, God, for the rainy day, because we needed the water, and so we hope that addresses our drought situation. But we had so much drought that the weathermen have different phases of it. We have drought, excessive drought, extensive drought, extreme drought. How bad is it? How bad do we have? We have so many different adjectives to put in front of the word drought because there's so many different levels. But as having lived in West Texas for a few years, when I was doing economic development out there, they have lakes that have dried up. That there used to be a lake there, but there's not a lake there anymore, kind of thing. So that is a definite possibility that's happened. It's not like you're going to go home tonight and turn on the water faucet and water's not going to come out, but it's not like that. But we need to plan ahead. We don't want to wait until we're at a bad stage to do something. Proposition 8 is about broadband infrastructure fund. to expand high-speed broadband access, assist in the financing of connectivity projects. Most of you are too young to remember, and I'm not old enough to remember. I'm just old enough to have a father who remembered and told me about the rural electrification project in Texas. For such a large state, getting electricity out to the rural areas was quite a task. And it wasn't something that was very profitable for the electricity companies because, like here in the urban area, you run a mile of line and it serves lots of people. You get out of rural Texas, you would run a mile of line and you may have just gone past a bunch of cows. There are some counties in West Texas that have more cows than they have people. But so it's not as profitable, and so it's not as doable to do that. So we had a major thing under when LBJ was in there, before I think when he was senator, not when he was president, had a big Texas rural electrification project. And so I think of that when I think of this connectivity and broadband, that it's very similar in that it's easier to do broadband in the city because, again, you run a mile and you're servicing lots of people. You get out into West Texas, the Panhandle, you run a mile and you're serviced to very few people. But it's important. Broadband's become a necessity, don't you think, to our daily life and also economic development, not just personally, but for business and economic development. When I was first elected, I was assigned to the Agriculture Committee, which some of you kind of tease me about. Agriculture? You represent Irving. I mean, why are you on the Agriculture Committee? It's not like we're a rural area. And I, too, thought agriculture was just about crops and cows, but it actually is also about the quality of life in rural areas. And when we talked about the quality of life in rural areas, that included things like broadband, the need for broadband, and also the need for health, telehealth, issues of health, access to health in rural areas. Sometimes they only had one hospital in the county, and sometimes there's still a small hospital, and some of those small hospitals are closed. So some people don't even have a hospital in their county. They have to go somewhere else, drive too much distance in order to get health care. So I thought of broadband connectivity as a rural issue until I found out that if you took I-30 as it cuts through Irving, Grand Prairie really, and then into Dallas, really kind of slices up Dallas in half. If you took I-30 into Dallas and divided it up and said, okay, north of 30, if that were its own city, it would be one of the best connected cities in the United States. South of I-30, if it were its own city, it would be among one of the least connected cities in the United States. And so it's not just a rural issue, it's also an urban issue. Don't have to be in the rural areas to have problems having connectivity and broadband and so on. So it's an important issue for us here in the urban areas too. It's not just a rural thing. So did anybody have any concerns that they wanted to mention or opposition to that one that they wanted to speak up and say? All right.
Yeah. I don't have any opposition, but I will tell you there's over 100 counties in Texas where less than 50% of the people have access to broadband. So, you know, that's almost half of it. And I distinctly remember as a teacher during COVID, there would be kids on Haynes Elementary School steps with their school-issued computers doing homework because they could only connect to the school Wi-Fi. They did not have Wi-Fi at the house. So I plan on voting for that, and I hope everybody else would too. That's a big part of our digital divide. It's a social economical problem. I'm all in favor of that one.
Shouldn't have to go down, the kids shouldn't have to go down to McDonald's or Starbucks
Absolutely.
or whatever in order to have connectivity, right?
Thank you for giving me a minute to talk about that. That's great.
Thank you for your words of support. Anyone say that they're on broadband connectivity? Proposition 9 is COLA, or otherwise known as cost of living adjustment. Maybe I should have said that the other way around. Cost of living adjustment, also known as COLA, for the teachers' retirement system in Texas. This is something that the teachers have been asking for since before I got elected. Because it's been so long since they've had a cost of living adjustment And you know about inflation. That's hitting everybody, and so it particularly hits those on fixed income, called fixed income for a reason. And so their money does not go as far. It's been decades, actually, since they've had an increase. I've been for it since the beginning. I remember when I came back from Washington, D.C., or otherwise known as the quorum break, Representative Rogers, who I'm friends with, came to me and said, Terry, you supported my bill last time for a 13th check. He says, I'm going to propose it again. Would you sign on my bill with me? And I said, yes, I'll be glad to sign on your bill for a 13th check. Will you sign on with me for a cost of living adjustment? Quiet. And I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about making decisions or voting on things that commit funds into the future. So for my other colleagues who weren't as anxious to support cost of living adjustment, I think it's not because they didn't want to support teachers. They were concerned about making a commitment now that committed funds into the future that they didn't know if we'd always have those funds there. That's my understanding of their opposition or concern with it. But we got it in this time as a constitutional amendment, and so you have an opportunity to vote on it and vote for our retired teachers who work very hard for not as much money as they could have made maybe in some other field, but with the hopes that they would have a good pension when they retired. So if you think we should support the teacher retirement system in Texas by passing the cost of living adjustment. Anyone want to dare speak against? No. Anyone want to speak against that? Or maybe speak for it, or have any questions about it? Okay. Proposition 11 is about El Paso. Typically, my position on bills that we have in the legislature is if it's a local bill, someone says, I want this for my city or my county, it only affects their city, their county. My attitude is if they want it, let them have it. It doesn't affect us. If they need it in their county, then I'll vote for it. This one, El Paso, is wanting to issue bonds supported by ad valorem taxes to fund the development and maintenance of parks and recreational facilities. Several other major counties in Texas already have this ability to do this. And for whatever reason, back when, before my time, back when El Paso didn't get included. So they're just asking to be included along with other counties that already have. Just add them to the list of counties that can authorize conservation and reclamation districts that are special districts such as water control and improvement districts, special utility districts, to be able to develop and finance parks and other purely recreational facilities with their taxes. So I think that we should vote for that one for El Paso. Anybody have any comments that they want to make on that one? And so, let's see. I was going to just skip over one down to, let's see, proposition, where is it? No, that's one I'm against. So I have a different attitude about it when it comes to Galveston County on Proposition 12. So I'll go there when we get to that one. Proposition 13 is to increase the mandatory age of retirement for state justices and judges. It's currently at 75 to be increased, and then there's another category that it's 70. So the one that's 70 to increase it to 75, and the one that's 75 to increase it to 79. As a senior, I'm for that. I'm opposed to ageism, as all the other isms, being biased against somebody just because of their age. I think just like a young person or an old person, because sometimes might be biased against someone because they're young, and you just automatically assume that they don't have enough experience, knowledge, whatever. So you should judge a person based on their abilities to do the job and not what their age is. So I hope you keep that in mind when I ask for re-election. This is not to say that they're guaranteed that, just that they would, that it would increase the mandatory age of retirement. So it wouldn't be a mandatory requirement. I suppose you can still vote them out if you think they're not doing a good job, but they wouldn't be forced to retire at that age. So that's my biased opinion on that one. Does anyone else have something that they want to comment on that particular one? I know some people feel like, well, that person's too old. I'm concerned about them. They seem so old. Can they still do the job? Well, then you just asked the right question. Can they still do the job? Proposition 14 is about parks, providing for the creation of a Centennial Park Conservation Fund. So I'm for this one. This issue kind of came up this past session out of the issue surrounding Fairfield Parks. Does everybody know about Fairfield Parks? Fairfield Park is south of here. It was a park owned by Vistra Energy of Irving and maybe some other entities, and it was leased by the state. They had a long-term lease. Somehow or another, as the state, our Department of Texas Parks and Wildlife dropped the ball, and they didn't renew the lease. And I called Vistra and talked to them and said, what's going on here? Why aren't you letting Texas continue their lease with Fairfield? And they said, we contacted them several times and told them the lease is up and asked them to do something about it. Did they want to do something about it? Did they want to extend the lease? And of course, this is Vistra's answer. So make sure to put that in there because I don't know exactly what happened, but Vistra's side of the story is that they had repeatedly asked the state to do something and the state failed to respond. And so then they had this great offer, monetarily, from a developer, going to make it a closed community, gated community of $1 million homes and the beautiful lake, Fair Lake, rather than it being something open to the public. We're going to swap?
What proposition is that?
The very last one, number 14.
Thank you.
It doesn't mention Fairfield in there, it just says creation of parks. But I'm explaining the backstory behind it. This is where they come out of that. They say, well, we need more parks, and we don't want to run into the problem we had before with Fairfield, where we think we have this great park, and then we lose it. I'm not sure that we've lost it yet. I think the state's still trying to hold on to it. We're just talking about eminent domain and some other things, but. I don't know about the developer, but I just know that they want it, and they're going to be making a lot of money off of it. And they jumped in when we dropped the ball. They jumped in and grabbed the ball and ran with it. So there might still be a possibility of getting Fairfield back. But this is not specifically about Fairfield. That's just where this idea that, oh wow, we need to do more about having parks in Texas. That we don't have enough parks in Texas as far as cities as well as states do a thing about parks per capita and whether or not we're doing a good job as a city having enough parks, and whether we're doing a nice job as a state in having parks. But so Texas doesn't rank way up there in that category either. And so this would provide the creation of Centennial Parks Conservation Fund to be used for the creation and improvement of state parks. Any questions about that one? While I'm on my page, I'll work my way back up again and go back to proposition number, that would be 12. Proposition number 12, well, I just said that when it came to FOSO, that if that area wanted it and it didn't affect us, then let them have it. But I don't feel that way about the Office of County Treasurer in Galveston County. They have some political issues there, maybe partisan political issues. They have some political issues there where they want to abolish their Office of the County Treasurer. We have some local experience with that next door in Tarrant County. Forgot exactly how long ago, maybe a decade or something. It's not recent, but not way long ago either, so I'm going to say about a decade or so ago. They decided to abolish their Office of County Treasurer. So now, all the things that the County Treasurer would do, not talking about all the employees, because the employees still have to be there. You're not getting rid of all the people that have to write the checks and do the accounting and take care of the expenses of the county. All those people still have to be there. You're just getting rid of that one position at the top. So then who does that job? Then it falls on the county commissioners, and too much of the time on their agenda in Tarrant County is spent on voting on expenses. And expenses become political. So for example, one state rep is allowed to have his district office in a county sub courthouse. Another state rep no, you can't have one. We're not gonna approve that expenditure. So that's one example of how the expenditures can become political. You may have read recently that there was, went through the county commissioners to approve grants to nonprofits. And there was a big discussion that I was kind of surprised about. Opposition to Girls Inc. Who knew Girls Inc. was controversial? I never thought Girls Inc. was controversial. I thought they did good things to help girls develop into good and productive women. But they decided not to grant any of those, to oppose all the funding to all those nonprofits. It wasn't even the county's funds. They did have the right of approval, but it wasn't the county's money. They just said, well, we don't like Girls Inc. and we don't look for these reasons. Several people came and spoke about it. And so we're going to deny these grants going to these nonprofits. Well, the letters were already prepared to say to the nonprofits, congratulations, because they thought the vote was just going to be a formality. It just goes through them. They, you know, some people want to say the phrase rubber stamp or whatever, but the formality of voting for it, and then the letters would go out. So they were shocked when they said, no, we're not going to give money to these nonprofits. Okay, we have to tear up those letters and prepare a new letter saying, sorry, the funds that we thought you were going to get, you're not going to be getting after all. So those are just a couple of examples of decisions that get made that become politicized. Sometimes partisan politics gets in there for things. And when you have a county treasurer, it kind of removes all that out from that part. So if you want to have the position that I typically have, which is, well, if that county wants it and that's what they want to do, then let them have it, then you would be voting for it. In my experience of when county treasurer's office is abolished, then decisions become too political, then you would vote against it. Any other comments on that one? And I'll remind you that I'm working backwards now from the bottom up. So Proposition 10 would be the next one. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Proposition 10 is to exempt ad valorem taxation equipment on inventory held by manufacturers of medical or biomedical products to protect the Texas healthcare network and strengthen our medical supply chain. Well, who doesn't want to protect our healthcare network? And of course we want to strengthen our medical supply chain if we can, but do they really need a tax exemption?
And is it going to affect the price of drugs?
I don't know. Yes, so that's that savings that they make, are they going to be passed along to the purchaser buying whatever? So anyone have a different position on that they'd like to state where they think it would be a good thing? I think on the surface, if you look at it real quick and say, oh, it's to help medical products, well, you think first blush, as we say in law school, first blush would be that, well, yeah, we want to help medical products, but not sure that they need an exemption. This might be one of the cases of giving someone's buddies an exemption that they really don't need. They're already making good money as is. But the next one, speaking of ones we already talked about, working again back up, proposition number 7. Again, may sound like it's addressing our problem that we had a couple of winters ago about our supply of energy. When people ask about that, I tell them that my fear was realized, and that was that we would do something about our energy supply, but we would just do enough to make it look like we had done something about it. But did you do anything about our issue on energy? Oh yes, we did this over here. This is the thing that we did. We reorganized ERCOT, and we reorganized the PUC, and we changed, we moved chairs around and whatever. And so we did it. That's taken care of without really truly addressing the problem. So I feel like we have not truly addressed the problem. And there's actually some energy companies that agree with that, including our locally owned Vistra. So this proposition is also for anyone that cares about who's for it and against it. The Sierra Club opposes this one. So it creates an energy fund to support construction, maintenance, modernization, and operation of electric generating facilities. One of the complaints about the bill is that, like other bills that we've had this past session, I mean, we are Texas, so we tend to favor oil and gas. And so that this bill kind of favors oil and gas to the detriment or slighting renewables. Well, I think we can support oil and gas and still be in favor of solar and wind. I mean, Texas has a lot of sun, doesn't it? So solar should be a good thing for Texas. And we have a lot of wind, so it's a good state for wind power. It's a good state for solar power. And being in favor of renewables, to me, it's not an either or, that we can be in favor of renewables and still continue to go with oil and gas while we're trying to make the switch away from that. So this one, part of the complaint about it is that it's too much leaning toward oil and gas to the detriment of renewable energy. Anyone have any other position on that one that they want to share with us?
Yeah, I don't think it includes much for new transmission lines either.
Right.
And that's a big problem. And then it favors gas, and the after action report for the big freeze in 21, the main problem was that the gas supplies froze up. And so the gas plants couldn't operate at full speed. And all the windmills worked great, but the gas plants.
Yeah. That's one of the things that the Vistra CEO, he was the CEO at the time, the CEO's changed since then. When he came before the joint committees to talk about the problem right after the freeze, he said that we're connected. I can't distribute it if I can't get it. If they're not creating it to give it to me, then I can't distribute it. So the people who produce it and the people who distribute it, that's all interconnected. And so he was brutally honest about it, and I'm not sure that we addressed all those problems. They're still allowing flaring. We're supposed to stop flaring. There's flaring permits are still going out, so there's still the issue of abandoned wells. Still the issue of needing to close those up. And one of the explanations I got, because Vistra also has, it's not just a Texas company, it has entities or activities, I should say, in California and up in Maine. So when we're up in Maine, where it gets cold all the time, well, why doesn't this happen in Maine? They know it's going to be freezing cold up there, so their transmission is enclosed. We don't have freezing temperatures, so ours is out in the open because we don't think weather's going to affect it, and it's too expensive to enclose all that. So theirs are closed up behind a wall, and ours is out in the open, and so ours freezes and theirs doesn't, even though they have more freezing temperatures than we do. So I thought that was interesting. I hadn't thought about all that, the difference in different states. And Texas being as it is, and I'm a native Texan for more than one generation, we don't want to work with anybody else. We just want to be Texas, right? So we have our own electric grid. And so one of the possible solutions was to connect up with the rest of the United States. No, we just want to have our own electric grid. And so the idea of connecting up with the electric grid, the national electric grid, was rejected. But El Paso is out there at the very tip of the state, and they're not on the Texas grid. So when there's the freeze, and you think, well, surely it doesn't freeze in El Paso, but yes, it did during that time. But they didn't have a problem because they were on the national grid. They were on the Texas grid. So all of us, all the rest of the state, except for that tip of where El Paso is, all the rest of us, our power went out. So I got a text from Encore saying, you will be experiencing a rolling outage. To which I replied, it was a group text to me and some other state reps. And I replied back to Raul, I said, I don't call 3 days rolling. We haven't had power for 3 days. I don't call that rolling. And so then he asked where I lived, and then miraculously my apartment complex where I stay in Austin had power. Yay. One advantage to being a state rep, I guess. I didn't know he was gonna do that, but he did. And as far as my neighbor, my next door neighbors were moving out. They were taking the dog with them. They didn't want to take the cat. I am not a cat person. I am a dog person. I love dogs. I don't dislike cats. I'm just a dog person. But when they said they were moving and they were going to just leave the cat there, that didn't seem right to me. So, just to make it sound a little more interesting, I say I live with my former neighbor, but it's my cat. So, anyway, took her in. Working back up, we just talked about the electric generator. So I turned the page, and that's why I lost where I was, because I couldn't see the one I just talked about because it's on the back page. Proposition 4. That's another one that at first glance you'd think, well, who could be not be for that? We get an exemption on our residence homestead from $40,000 to $100,000. This one's kind of lengthy because the House and the Senate didn't agree, which is a common issue in the legislature, where we have different philosophies. We had passed in the House a property tax relief, as the governor calls it, property tax relief, in the same mode that what the governor wanted, which was the reduction of compression of the tax rate. And so compression of the tax rate, usually the next question that comes from any constituent is, what does that mean? Well, compression means is that for every dollar that the state puts into the school district, then that lessens $1 that they have to ask in the way of property taxes of the residents in the school district. So it's a compression. It sounds good at first when you think, oh, well, the state's putting in $1 to our school district. But is it an extra $1? No, it's just a replacement $1. They put in $1 and then they take out the $1 that you would have given. It's no extra money at all. Did you realize that? It's no extra money at all. It does lower your property taxes, but it doesn't mean any extra money for the school district. Anyway, that's what the governor wanted, was the compression. That's what the House voted for. And then, to my surprise, the speaker hit the gavel and said, sine die, which means without day, no further day. In other words, end of that session, told all of us we could go home. The Senate was really mad because they were still meeting across the rotunda in the Senate chamber. And once we passed something, it has to go over to the Senate to approve. Well, our saying sine die and going home meant that if they wanted to make changes to it, then they would have to come back to us. If they accept it, we don't have to, it doesn't come back to us, it goes on to the governor. But if they want to make changes to it, then it has to come back to us to approve the changes. And we weren't going to be there. So that was kind of not a good thing that we did. I was surprised by that and kind of not too much for it. But anyway, that's what happened. I get this mixed up on the sessions. I guess that was second session. Second session. So the Senate side, their idea of property tax relief was to increase the homestead exemption from 40 to 100. I'm still at the Capitol office, even though we've done sine die, and we have a TV where we can follow hearings and what's happening on the floors of either chamber. And so I'm watching Lieutenant Dan, as I call him, Lieutenant Dan proposing a homestead exemption. And that's my party's idea. So I was like, wow, this is a strange feeling I've never had before. I'm agreeing with Lieutenant Governor. And my staff said, yeah, Redwood, I know what you mean. I'm having the same strange feeling I've never had before, that I agree with the Lieutenant Governor. So that we agree with that idea. In fact, it was just the session or two before that, I can't remember, my first or second section, that it was second because it was Phelan. First one was mine was Bond. So Phelan had come into a caucus with us and said what they wanted to do as far as property taxes. And we said, we can't support that. What we can support is an increase in the exemption. And then, in an unusual display of bipartisanship, compromising, working together, the because Phil had the authority to speak for his side. They went along with our ask for an increase in the residence homestead, and at that time it went up from 25 to 40. So it's just in last session, as in regular session, in other words 2 years ago, that we increased it from 25 to 40. And now we're talking about increasing it from 40 to 100. Well, maybe that's partly justified by the fact about how much your home values increased, right? It sounds like a pretty big jump, but some people's home values have had a pretty big jump too. So I like that idea, and so since we weren't there, we sine-died to say anything about that idea. We had to come back for another session, and then, so that must have been the first session. In the second session, then they combined the two, I remember this one, combined the two ideas, the Senate idea and the House idea into one. So you see in there about the compression, and you also see in there about the homestead exemption. Well, that was going to help a lot of people. Doesn't help everybody though, does it? So part of the opposition to this bill is, yes, that helps some, but it does not help all. And our surplus didn't just come from property taxes. Our surplus actually came from sales taxes, more than property taxes. But yet we didn't do anything to grant any relief on sales tax, even though most of our surplus came from sales tax. We chose to give relief to property owners through property tax exemptions. And for those of us who are property owners, and we say, yay, thank you, that sounds like a great idea to me, what's your problem with it? Well, it just doesn't return, the idea is to return all this surplus to the people who paid it, then we're not really returning it to all the people who paid it, because most of it came from sales taxes. And we did nothing about sales tax relief. It also is residence homesteads. So it didn't do anything about commercial or apartments. So for those reasons, some people say that they don't like it. If you're a homeowner, then you kind of like the exemption from 40 to 100. So another concern about it is to authorize the legislature to provide for a 4-year term of office for members of the board of directors in appraisal districts. And so some people didn't like that part about the appraisal districts, because some appraisal districts have some problems. Anybody else want to add? I'm not saying a yay or nay on that one. I'm just trying to tell you what the pros and cons are on it. And so, anyone else like to add to the discussion?
Well, politically, I'm thinking the governor doesn't want public schools anyway. So in his little twisted mind, he's saying, okay, we'll do this, but we're not going to be providing anything for the public schools. Because when I got my school taxes, it was $14. I went down and I said, something is terribly wrong here. I can't believe I'm complaining because I'm not paying anything. She goes, well, next year you probably won't have any taxes if this goes through. I'm like, and what happens to our schools? I'm a retired school teacher, so vote number 9. But
You got that plug in there.
yeah, this is very confusing because it sounds really good, like you said, for the older people, for all of us that have homesteads, but not everybody can get homestead, you know, that amount. But I think that's his little way of saying, okay, we'll do this, everybody will think it's great, and then we just don't have as much money to go to the public schools. That's just my opinion.
Well, like I mentioned, actually, what the House passed, that was the compression rate, was what he was asking for. And this was, I don't know if you've heard, but there's kind of a war, inter-party war among the speaker, the lieutenant governor. You heard about that? And the governor. And so the House, this particular case, the House was passing what the governor asked for, and the lieutenant governor was going against the governor and saying homestead exemption. So I don't know if we can totally blame it on the governor, since he wanted compression rate.
Well, like you
He didn't
said,
even want homestead exemptions.
yeah, we'll give you $1 and take it back again.
Yeah. We'll put in $1 and we'll take out the $1.
Yeah.
No increased money for public ed. Which is part of my opposition to vouchers, but we can talk about that later if you'd like to. Moving back up the line again, then the next one to talk about is Proposition 3, which is a constitutional amendment prohibiting the imposition of an individual wealth or net worth tax. So, tax on the wealthy may not be a good idea, but right now you can do it or you can not. We don't have a tax on wealth or net worth tax. But if this passes, then it says you can't have one. And so these is a little bit more flexibility for what we want to do as far as taxes, to have it as it is now, rather than having a constitutional amendment. And remember I said, a lot of times we have constitutional amendments, not because they're amending the Constitution, but because they want to get something in there that is very difficult to change back. And so that's the thing with this one. And a lot of us in the room, maybe not everybody, are not wealthy enough for this bill to apply to us. And so this has a benefit to the wealthy, but not necessarily having a benefit to anyone else, which is another one of the reasons given for being against it. And like I said, it's not prohibiting a tax that we currently have. It's saying if you come up with the idea in the future that you want to do this, we're going to say right now that you can't. So that one, I've got marked as a no on my part. Anybody else have one add to the discussion or give a different point of view? Yes, sir?
Has anyone talked about how it would affect small business, family-owned businesses? Because in the past, people are against wealth taxes because they feel that small family-owned businesses would be decimated by the taxes.
Yeah, as long as their small business is worth, let's say, $500 million to $1 billion.
I didn't know if there was a limit on.
Oh yeah. There's a major limit on when it kicks in. So if you're a billionaire, then it would kick in on you. If you have a small business and your business does $1 billion a year in profits, then it might kick in for you.
I hadn't really thought about the impact on small business. Because the wording of the proposition is the assets and liabilities of an individual or family. And of course, your asset might be a business,
Right.
but it says the assets of an individual or family, so it's not really taxing the business directly. It's talking about taxing an individual or family.
Right.
Small businesses can be quite large. We tend to think of a small business as being a mom and pop store, but small business is defined by in its category. And so, a small business can be quite large, but not necessarily mom and pop. I didn't really think about it having a negative impact on small business.
I don't think it's worded very well.
Yeah.
Because it's vague.
The assets.
I mean, as far as that goes, like there's a it sounds to me like there could be a gray area.
Yeah, the only wealth tax they do now is property.
It's property tax. Property tax is a
Which-
wealth tax.
Property tax is a wealth tax,
Yeah.
always
Yeah,
has
right,
been.
exactly.
But that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about liquid wealth instead of property wealth.
But it's worded,
It
it
just
says
say
assets,
assets.
which
Assets.
is property. So I think it'd be kind of hilarious if it passes and suddenly, what do they do about property tax? I don't know if they're actually thinking about that, but it seems
Yeah, I
like
don't think it's worded very well.
Yeah.
Well, that in itself can, not necessarily this one, but just as a general philosophy to have on voting on amendments. If you don't feel like they're worded well, if you feel like it's too vague, then that would be a good philosophy to have for voting against any proposition, whether it's this one or some other one. So the first shall be last, as they say. Proposition number 1 is about protecting the right to engage in farming, ranching, timber production, horticulture, and wildlife management. My initial reaction was I'm for it. Both sides of my family were farmers. They had their own farms. The Irving family farm was north of 183, which, believe it or not, used to be the country. That was the dividing line, city on this side, country on that side. So the family farm was on O'Connor. Charlie O'Connor, dairy farm was my grandparents' neighbor. And then further on down the road was Carpenter with his ranch. So the front of the farm was on O'Connor, the back of the farm was on what was then called Carpenter, now called MacArthur. So it went from O'Connor to MacArthur. And the back got taken in eminent domain to build MacArthur High School on, so that's on my family farm, my grandparents' family farm. And then the front half got taken in housing development. In Capito, all that family's farm got taken in housing subdevelopment. I remember a case where something a little bit more suburban than we are, a little bit further out, exurbs, I guess they call them, where they built this big development and next to it was a pig farm. Well, after people bought the homes, sometimes when we go in and look at a house, we don't think about all that other stuff. We just, do I like this house? Can I afford it? Do I want to live here? And don't notice what else is around. And after people bought in this subdevelopment, they go, a pig farm over there. It doesn't smell very good. I don't like that pig farm over there. And so they started organizing to be against the pig farm. Well, my thought was the pig farm was there before you. You should have thought about that when you were buying your home, or the developer should have thought about that before they built a housing development next to a pig farm. So I kind of tended to identify with the pig farm because it was already there. And so my thought when I saw this, I thought back to that. There's also been in some places here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where beautiful subdevelopments have been built next to the landfill. And the landfill causes a problem, right? As far as the odors from the landfill. So I guess we just need to be careful about what we're building, where, and when we're buying, what we're buying, what's in the area that might be. And you don't always know. You go and look at the house, and you like the house, you can afford it, it's great, you just choose the house, and maybe the wind was in a different direction that day, and you didn't know that that was going to be a problem. So that was my thought in being for protecting. This bill is also nicknamed the right to farm. Why would you be against the right to farm? So again, my initial reaction was to be for this bill to protect the right to have farming. And so we still have, maybe a little bit further out than Irving now, suburbs that are further out from the Dallas area that there's still farms in those suburbs or exurbs or whatever you want to call them. And so they were there first. And so that's kind of my thought on that, is that they were there first, and so they shouldn't lose their right to farm or ranch or whatever just because somebody decided to build a development next to them. But as you may have heard, our legislature and governor to have been in a position of being against local control. And they've been passing a lot of bills to limit local control. And so this bill would also have an impact on that. I would kind of like that the city council would be able to grant or oppose zoning because of a farm or a ranch or something. But this bill would still gives the legislature the authority to authorize and regulate when it's agricultural practices, because they consider that part of their authority, agriculture. So a lot of the loss of local control depends on whether the state has some authority over a certain area, and if that's a state's area, then they take that all the way down to the local area and say, no, that's a state thing, that's not a local thing. So the state would still have the authority to regulate agricultural practices when necessary to protect health and safety, animal health, that's my bad eyes, animal, not criminal, animal health, crop production, natural resources, use of power, eminent domain. So this is again a kind of veiled, more loss of local control. So any other opinions on that, pro or con, since I kind of landed down on both sides?
Yeah.
Yes, sir?
Yeah, a few of us live in far South Irving, where there's a lot of land.
Yes.
And right now, those are horses. But
Aren't they
could-
beautiful animals?
They're beautiful, but those places could just as easily become pig farms. And this would give the city no say over whether intense agriculture could move into that area, as opposed to the more
So its
bucolic.
current use might be something acceptable to the residents in the area,
Right,
but then it also allows a future use. The current use allows a future use that might not be.
yeah,
So-
it wasn't. Yes.
So the horses aren't causing a problem?
Oh, no, no,
The horses, okay. Such
not unless you're the
beautiful-
one mucking out the stable.
I thought until I did a tour of Lone Star Park and they put you on a little tram and they can take you back around to the, did you know that you can do that on like a Saturday morning? They take you back around to the horse barns. And I thought, oh, I love horses. I want to go see the horses. And I'm used to my grandparents' plow horses, or my cousins had palominos that were riding horses and stuff. And you could pet on them and love on them and stuff and everything. So I guess I was kind of childlike that way, because I was a full-grown adult. This is not too long ago, less than 10 years ago. Anyway, they take us back around there and I see these beautiful horses, and my first instinct is to reach out and pet on the horse. Race horses aren't friendly. I just want to put that out there as a warning. They are high-strung, they bite. I didn't get bit, but the horse let me know that he didn't want to be petted. So then they said, no, don't pet the horses. But I digress sometimes. So anyway, we're talking about horses. I'm going to blame it on Bill.
You can blame it.
So that one's one that, first blush, I thought this is a good one. I was thinking about the person who's already, the activity that's already there, and the neighborhood moves in next to it. Now, also, they don't want you to do what you've been doing maybe for generations, because they just built a subdevelopment next to it. I was thinking about the right of that person. And like I said, this bill is nicknamed the right to farm. And so I was for that. But I'm also opposed to the loss of local control, which is a really odd position, because I can remember back when it was my party that was for, hey, federal government, we need you to come in and intervene and protect us from all these bad things the local people are doing to us. And now the positions have totally flipped, and their party is now for having the control, and my party's for local control. So, and I guess we have somebody here who might can speak to some of the loss of local control. Did you want to add any comments? Mr. Zeski, from your point of view.
I believe in local control, but we can just keep on going. Thank you.
Well, Nolan Ryan is advertising for this, so that'll be a big thing. People, well, if Nolan Ryan says.
Oh, he is.
Of course.
Well, he has interest.
Yeah, he has,
Yeah.
he has feedlots.
Well, we all like Nolan Ryan.
Yeah, so it must be a good bill.
Yeah,
My son's little first Ranger outfit had 34 on it
yeah, yeah.
from back when.
As long as you're not living next to his feedlot.
We need more local control,
Yes.
especially if you go by who was here first, and I keep thinking of the airport.
Uh,
And all they're doing now to West Irving is making us a giant warehouse. And it's because it's airport property, so they can do whatever they want.
Yeah. Well,
Even the ones that they tore down all those houses, and they said they'd become, nobody should live out
Right.
here.
And now
But
they're
all of a
building-
sudden,
They're building
there's
again.
one warehouses and big old zero lot line houses.
Yep.
I know that just a few years ago, the legislature voted to change the inventory tax. And the inventory tax that we had made it difficult for businesses who had very expensive inventory to inventory it. One of those businesses is airplane parts. Wow, airplane parts are really expensive. Little bitty part could be megabucks, right? So they weren't able to keep airplane parts to service the airplanes here because we charge such a high inventory tax. So we changed that, lowered the income tax. We got a division related to Boeing that put in a warehouse out there, and it's got a lot of very expensive airplane parts in that building. So that's one of the warehouses that I know of kind of out in that area. So you can blame that on our lowering the inventory tax. They said, oh good, now we can warehouse some stuff here that we couldn't afford to warehouse here before.
Go by there and look at Amazon. You cannot drive on Valley View around 4 o'clock because it's just covered with trucks.
And the road's not very wide.
No, and it's falling apart anyway because of the big
They're
trucks.
already redoing it. and they just did it a few
Yeah.
years ago.
Yep.
But and that's all on.
Well, before my time, when they were deciding to build Love Field, and I can't imagine this at all, that when they were deciding to build Love Field, it was kind of out away from the city.
Sure.
Who can imagine that? It seems like it's right almost into downtown now, right? So when they built it, it was out of way. They bought the land for Love Field. And then as happens in economic development, it's called the direction of growth. Kind of like Highway 161 in Grand Prairie, that's been a big change there for their economic development, became a direction of growth. Love Field became a direction of growth and everything grew that way. And next thing you know, you had all these houses very close in to the airport. And I do remember as a kid on the news about people complaining about the noise from the planes flying over because they were still not very high up in the air yet when they were going over some homes and some houses, and they said that their glass windows rattled, their china cabinet rattled, their cups and stuff rattled and everything, that it was just too loud and too much noise. So they said, aha, when we build DFW Airport, we'll buy lots of land around the runways so that when the planes are taking off, that they will be up high enough in the air before they fly over any homes, and that'll reduce the concern about problems of planes flying over houses. And then the DFW Airport became the direction for growth, and sure enough, they did build houses kind of close to the airport anyway, but supposedly the ones that are close to the airport, they're still supposed to be where the planes could be high enough up in the air not to cause a problem. And so we still have houses close to the airport. There are 3 family cemeteries on the grounds of the airport. My family has one of them, meaning that they're not perpetual care. If someone dies in my family, we have to go out there and mow to get ready for the funeral. But there are 3 family cemeteries on the grounds of the airport. You don't see them because they're out there in all that extra land that they bought up, and so not driving through it with to a terminal or something. It's one of those exits off to the side. But they thought they were addressing that problem by having buying up lots of extra land around the airport, protect the homeowners. But you don't like all the warehouses, huh?
And the views, and it's the places for like the wild animals that all lived out there, are all those poor coyotes and raccoons and possum are now all moving in. Because they don't have anywhere to go.
Yeah, we keep building on their habitat.
Yep. Yep.
It does say in here, protecting their right to engage in farming, ranching, timber production. I don't know how much timber production we do in our area, but horticulture and wildlife management. So it does have wildlife in there. But yes, we keep encroaching in on their habitat, and then you see people on the news complain, there was a bobcat in my yard. How about your yards in the bobcat's habitat? Or the coyote's habitat, or whatever. So anyway, so that's all the covering of the constitutional amendments, unless someone else had something else they wanted to talk about that we hadn't touched on yet. Everybody go out and vote. Know that you don't have to vote on all the constitutional amendments. Just because they're all on the ballot doesn't mean you have to vote for all of them. So if you're conflicted about any one of them, that you say, I don't know whether this is a no or a yes still, even if I heard the presentation at the League of Women Voters and I read all this stuff, I can read about it, I'm still conflicted. You don't have to vote for it. You vote for the ones that you feel very certain about, how you feel that this is a yes or a no. And the ones that you're conflicted about, don't worry yourself over them. You don't have to vote for all of them. Maybe that's a bad thing for me to say, but you don't have to vote for all of them. Any other questions about special session or other things that are going on in the legislature? Delly?
I just had a question about Proposition 8.
Proposition 8.
Does Proposition 8 provide, it says it provides high-speed broadband access. Is that just for infrastructure building, or is it also to provide grants, for example, for people who can't afford broadband access?
My understanding is that it's for infrastructure. I don't know of anything that prohibits another use, but my understanding is that the intent of this is infrastructure, broadband infrastructure.
So no, if it's, the infrastructure allows for access, you still have to pay to receive the actual.
Right. A lot of what they're talking about, I think, is putting up city-owned Wi-Fi networks. so that they use the existing poles, but then put Wi-Fi infrastructure in those, and then the people around there can use those Wi-Fi signals.
For those of you who can't hear the question is about city Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
access.
I think that's part of it. The problem I had with that is that we've all been paying $3 and $4 and $5 a month on our phone bills since the 90s to do that.
So where did that money go?
And the last thing I read was there was $8 to $12 billion of funding at the federal government that the telecom companies have paid into, and they're still trying to figure out how to do the grants to put the money out.
Told me that there's this federal government program and you're eligible. I don't know whether they thought it was because I was poor, whether it was because of my age or whatever reason that I was eligible. And so here's some paperwork that you might could fill out to get
Right.
a reduced rate.
Right. So that's a huge program that hasn't been used much,
It's not been advertised.
and I'm sure that the state's not going to advertise about it. So they're setting up their own thing. So I voted for it, but I'm not absolutely sure that it's necessary because there's a lot of money sitting out there that hasn't been used.
Well, especially after you said that about once it becomes an amendment, it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to change. Now I'm kind of worried about voting yes.
Be careful what you do for school vouchers. Anybody want to talk about that, or you already heard everything about that you wanted to hear about? So it's not passing this session. It's not passing this session. The House is blocking it. The Senate passed it. The House is blocking it. So I'm very proud to be in the House.
Thank you. Not pass it another session?
Yes, we cannot pass it another session. When I was a freshman, they had this tradition that we've done every year except pandemic year session, where the former elder statesmen return to the Capitol, and it's called the Speaker's Reunion Day. And they line up along the side of the chamber, and they go up one at a time at the Speaker's podium. They introduce themselves, what years they served, what part of the state they represented. And so it's a reunion day. And then after that, they go out on the Capitol lawn, and they have barbecue. My staff said, hey, Rick, we're going to go out there and get us some barbecue and take it back to the office. Okay. Well, I'm going to go out there and get some barbecue, and I'm going to go talk to these old guys. In my naivete as a freshman, I thought I was going to soak up all this wisdom from these elder statesmen. So I sat down at a table of men that I didn't know any of them. And so I said, well, I'm a freshman. What advice would you give to me? And one man said, my advice to you is not to think of the other party. And he didn't name the party, he just said the other party. Not to think of the other party as the enemy. Think of them as the loyal opposition. And then he paused and said, your enemy is the Senate. So this other man said, I said, I wonder if it wears off, this sense of awe I feel whenever I look at the Capitol building. It's such a beautiful building. And every time I see it, it's like, wow, I have the honor and privilege. They elected me, and I have the honor and privilege to serve in this beautiful building. After several terms, does that kind of like wear off? Like, yeah, it's the Capitol building. It's just where you go to work every day. Does that sense of awe wear off? And the man said, another man, a different man from the first one, said, yes, I know what you're talking about. He said, I had the same exact feeling when I first got elected. He said, I can't believe that they elected me to serve here in this beautiful building. He said, but then after a while, my thinking changed, and my thinking changed to, I can't believe they elected him to serve. So anyway, that's two funny stories from the senior staffers. We're opposed to vouchers. If it had been up to the House, the teachers would have already gotten their pay raise, the school districts would have already gotten their increased funding, but they had to go tie it into vouchers. So they thought that we'll make them vote for vouchers because we know they want teacher pay raises. We know that they want increased public school funding. So we'll make them vote for vouchers because that's the way that they're gonna get, you won't get more money for teachers, you won't get more money for schools unless you support vouchers. And so we voted no on that in the regular session back in the spring. Well, the governor didn't like that response. We couldn't get them to separate out the two. If they'd separate out the two, we'd say no to vouchers and yes to the increased funding for schools and teachers. The current bill we have, Brad Buckley, who I served with when I served on education, is now the chair. And he has a bill that is for public school funding. It's kind of a voucher light. He doesn't totally take out vouchers. It's kind of a voucher light program with limitations on it, vouchers. And then he has the funding for teachers. But it's not what the governor wanted. The governor doesn't want it, so the bill's not moving forward. And so there will be no vote, this session on vouchers. You really thought there would have been, right? That we would have already had a vote, like that was the number one thing. That's the reason why I said, okay, why are we not voting on vouchers? Well, we're gonna move on to this immigration stuff because that's not moving. And then so we started voting on all this anti-immigrant stuff. So, and that's when the speaker said, be sure and early vote, members, because you're gonna be back here on November the 7th. So the anticipation or thought is that it's not happening in this special session. And he's already told us that if he doesn't get it this special session, he'll call us back again. So that's the governor's strategy. I'm going to keep calling you back until I get what I want. And we keep saying, you can keep calling us back, but we're not voting for vouchers. So I'm very proud of the House for that. If any of you are for vouchers, I'm sorry that we're not voting the way that you would like for us to, but we feel like we're supporting our public schools and our public school teachers in taking that position. Yes, sir.
Irving ISD Board of Trustees have already voted to close 2 elementary school districts. And Irving is not the only school district around. Especially the elementary schools, and the high schools are suffering lower numbers, and a lot of administrators are scared to death of money-wise. And one of the things that's happened, and I think it's thanks to this voucher thing, is that I've heard many school board trustees at different school districts say, oh, we had to really pass our budget without even really knowing what money we're getting.
So some school boards have actually passed deficit budgets in anticipation that maybe they would get some money, but they just don't have it now. So we've put our school boards in the unusual situation. Some of them have never passed a deficit budget before, but they did this time because they haven't heard yet on what money they're going to get.
I really think I don't know how to say it kindly, but it's becoming a circus of some regard. It's terrible.
So if it hadn't been for that, then as far back as our regular session in the spring, teachers would have already had their pay raise.
Not
Schools
one
would have
check.
already,
Now they just like to give that one extra check, but that's supposed to do anything.
And then the school boards, the schools would have had additional funding, the teachers would have had a pay raise, but it's all because it had to be tied into vouchers. And we said, if you're going to make us vote for vouchers, then we can't vote for the package because we're opposed to this part. And that was the strategy. We're going to make them vote for vouchers because we know they want this. And we said, no, we're not going to vote for vouchers.
Another sample of
Yes.
that is, I belong to a Facebook group, DFW Teachers Lounge. And they were all posting,
Cute name.
because they just got their September checks, at the beginning of October. And all the teachers were posting, hey, my net pay was minus $168 a month because the pay, even though the pay went up a little bit, the health insurance went up and da-da-da. So their net pays were all going down.
Supposedly they were supposed to be getting more money, and instead the bottom line was that the net was less.
Even the school districts that had given the teachers raises and stuff without, funding it kind of out of their own pocket. And so all these teachers were like, and I really think, I'm really worried about how many teachers we're going to have. Ultimately, we're going to wake up and people are going to be leaving that profession.
Yes, it would have helped for teacher retention, teacher recruitment, if we'd already had those pay raises in place. And for those who believe in school choice, so do I. I want you to be able to choose where you send your children to school. Within the public schools, I believe we already have choice within the public schools that you can choose a different campus, choose a certain program, which means you might go to a different campus than the one that's would be typically assigned to you in your neighborhood. So I think in some ways like that, we already have school choice. And if a parent wants to send their child to a Catholic school or to the ICI school or wherever, one that's not even religious affiliated, or just a private school, then I think they should have the right to choose to send their child to that school if that's what they want. But they think, I just don't think tax dollars should go for that, so.
Well, didn't they say something about, well, we'll give you $8,000 towards the charter school or whatever?
Yes.
That's not gonna cover anything.
Yes, the problem with that is that if you go to them and you say, we've got this voucher and it's good for $8,000, we want to enroll our child. And they say, well, that's great that you have $8,000. Our tuition is $16,000, so now all you got to do is put another $8,000 with it. Does it really give someone who's low income the
No, that's what I'm
opportunity?
saying, but people don't realize.
And then also, by the way, we don't have school buses, so you have to
You
transport
have
it.
to pay for your own uniforms.
And all that, so.
You gotta pay for your own books and.
Yeah, I loved the fact that the vouchers were $8,000 and the per student
61.
was $6,100
How
for
do they
public
justify
schools.
that?
So that, private schools are much more efficient, but they cost $2,000 more.
Debbie has a question.
Delicate question.
This might be a little controversial, but I learned that Texas teachers cannot strike. It's like in the law.
They're considered professionals, not workers or labor, and so they're, don't strike, at least not in Texas.
No, they can.
Would there ever be a consideration to change the law to allow them to strike? So maybe that would be a
Yay.
kicker.
I could file the bill, but it wouldn't go anywhere.
I understand, but maybe that's the only
I
way.
mean, you can belong to the union,
Mm-hmm,
but you can't strike.
yeah. Yeah.
They could be like a sick-in,
And
Yes.
slow
Irving
day,
did that
wouldn't be
years
called a
and years
strike,
ago.
but there has been such a thing as,
Back
when
in
did
the
that happen?
50s. It was back in the 50s, I believe it was, in
Oh,
Irving,
wow.
wasn't it?
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago where they did the sick.
And they're technically not unions, they're professional associations.
yeah, yeah.
The,
Suppose, so the idea is that we are too professional to strike,
Yeah.
is the idea behind that. And did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
And the contract is not with the school district and the union, it's with the individual teacher.
But I think like, what's it, like Chicago and some other places, there are, maybe also in California, that teachers are allowed to strike, but not in Texas is not a pro-union state, it's a right-to-work state, which is kind of like some people say really means a right-to-be-fired state. So, it's called a right-to-work state.
Yeah,
Any other questions?
the right to be an unfettered employer.
So it looks like I'll be going back to Austin in November. Looks like I'll be early voting this next week or something, so I'll be prepared to go back and be voting on these constitutional amendments. You can take your paper with you.
You
For
can't
voting.
take it in there.
You're allowed to take that paper with you to refer to, but you cannot use a phone. So if you thought, oh, I got information on my phone, I'll just bring up my phone and look at it, then I just want to let you know that, no, you can't refer to your phone. Maybe the exact same information, maybe you're calling up the League of Women Voters Voter Guide, or maybe you're calling, I don't think
It's
my
on mine.
newsletter's not on the phone, but you might be calling up something, maybe you took a picture of it. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing, but you're just not allowed to use phones in the polling place, but you can take in paper, so I just want to be sure to mention that. Anything else we need to caution people about when they're voting?
Well, it's no electronic devices, so that means you can't take in a PC either. And you know, a lot of the younger generations walk around with their laptop or their mini, and it's no electronic devices. You can't take any campaign literature in. So if you've got somebody who's passing out, please vote for Proposition 9, fine, but you can't take that into the booth with you, the polling place.
But
with
you can take this in. That's weird.
Voter's guide? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, the voter's guide can go in there, yes.
Since I haven't voted yet, I'm not sure I remember. What else is on our ballot in Irving besides the amendments? Anything else?
No,
Okay,
no.
that's all I knew
This
about.
is
I thought maybe there was something else.
There will
Right.
be a big old.
This is called a uniform election, which means it's a statewide, we're all voting on the same thing. There's, as I understand it, there'd be no extras that I know of.
There are extras in other communities.
Yeah,
Other
other
communities, yeah.
There's some,
So
Yeah,
the
I
voting on
see.
constitutional amendments is a statewide thing.
Right.
And then while we're there in some other locations, there could be some other local
Right.
initiatives. So for example, one of the other things that happened this last legislative session, you may have heard about my colleague who sat right in front of me most of the session, Slayton. It's the first time since 1927 that the House has expelled a member of the House, of one of its own members from the legislature. Since 1927, almost 100 years. In fact, the pictures of the members from the 1927 legislatures on one of the back walls. So they expelled 2 members that year. I don't remember the circumstances about those 2. In this case, and I won't be too specific, but he was accused of inappropriate relations with a staffer who's a minor. So I think, how can a staffer be a minor? Usually when I hear the term minor, I think of a kid, a teenager or something. Well, she was a teenager, but she was 19. So not real young, but still considered, young enough to be considered, I guess, a minor. Anyway, a young staffer. Inappropriate relations with a young staffer. And so he was expelled. His name was taken off his desk, his name was taken off the vote board at the top within a minute. They were already ready for that vote. Our doorkeeper came down right in front of me and was taking the nameplate off of his desk, and they already had a ladder that they rode over there and climbed up the ladder and took his name from the vote list. So that's an election that's going to be going on at the same time as the constitutional amendments, just right next door to us, like Kaufman County, and that just east of Dallas County is the district he represents. Also includes like maybe Royce City, some of that over that way. Rockwall? No, not Rockwall, because Justin Holland represents Rockwall. So it's more like Kaufman and that way, east and south and east. So they have a special election, and unlike primaries, it's not divided, because this is not a primary election, right? We don't go in voting on a Republican ballot and voting on the Democratic ballot. So whether they're Republican or Democrat, they're all on the same list. My understanding is that there's one Democrat, and the rest of them, which is almost a half dozen candidates, are Republicans, because it is a Republican-leaning district. And so the voters will be voting on it's a special election, and the voters will be voting on who's going to replace Slayton since we expelled him from the legislature. So he's not allowed on the House floor anymore. And neither is Ken Paxton, interestingly.
because he's been impeached.
One of the other things that we did on the House that was different from the Senate is that we voted to impeach Ken Paxton. Well, that's the House's role in that process. Is there enough there to merit impeachment? And so I guess you should know, in case you're for Ken Paxton, that I voted to impeach Ken Paxton. The Senate's job is not the impeachment part, it's to vote whether or not there's cause to remove him from office. So we impeach, then it goes over to them to do the trial. And maybe you heard, we're only one vote away from him being removed from office. So when they were having their meeting, as you might already realize or understand, the Democrats were united in voting to remove Paxton from office. So the Republicans were a little bit more conflicted for maybe obvious reasons, because it was one of their own colleagues and a state officer, statewide elected official. If there had been enough Republicans, then those Republicans who didn't vote to remove him would have voted. But when they did like a little poll about how the vote was going to go, and they saw that they were one vote short of having enough votes, then a lot of the Republicans, for political reasons, said, I don't want to be hanging out there, somebody voted against him, it's not going to pass. Now if it's going to pass, and he's going to be removed from office, then I'm going to vote for it. But if we don't have enough people, then I'm not going to be hanging out there with a group that did. So that's why the vote ended up the way it did. I don't know if you'd heard that part or not, or how much public knowledge that was. We thought like the vote, only 2 voted against it, everybody else was for it, kind of thing. No, there were a lot of them that were in favor of removing him from office. They just didn't want to be hung out there when there wasn't enough to actually do it. So those are the two very difficult historic things that we had this past session, was the expulsion of a member that's leading to a special election on this ballot, and then the impeachment of Ken Paxton. I was surprised, totally unexpected to me. Ken Paxton visited the House floor this past week, and he was removed. Paxton and Phelan don't get along.
On
you may
what
have
ground?
heard.
Why was he removed? Or is there a law that says he can't be?
Not that I know of. But Phelan's the Speaker of the House, and he tells the Sergeant at Arms, remove him. Then he was removed.
You know what was bad about that vote was Angela Paxton, who did not vote, but so that removed her from the total, but they still had the
Still
same.
counted her in the numbers.
Yeah, it should have been one less, then we would have had it.
You might be surprised to know or hear that I actually wrote a note to Angela Paxton. I see her once in a while. Obvious reasons, we're not close. She's over in the Senate, I'm in the House. I don't see her very often. She's Collin County, I'm over here, don't see her very often. But I empathize with her. Gave a lot of thought to the note, but I wrote her a note and said, Angela, I want to let you know that I voted for impeachment. And so even though I voted for impeachment, I thought about you when I cast my vote. And I thought about how difficult all this process must be on you, and that you're going to be required to sit through this and hear all this. And so kind of I was trying to avoid saying thoughts and prayers, but it was kind of a thoughts and prayers type note that I sent to her. So,
Did she reply?
not that I know of. If she called the office or anything, I didn't know that. I did write a note to Tam Parker also, because he's the state senator out of Flower Mound, and told him I voted for impeachment, and now I'm trusting you to hear all the facts and make the best decision.
He was the one who voted of the 6 who said, don't even have the trial, remember? I was
Yes,
surprised.
me too. Some people said that it was because they think because he was so newly elected, which makes him more vulnerable for re-election.
Oh.
The political wisdom is, I don't know how true it is, but prevailing political wisdom is that your most difficult time to get re-elected is the first time that you run for re-election. That's when you're most vulnerable. So that it may have been a political decision on his part to protect his re-election. I haven't talked to him or asked him about it, but he did respond. He contacted my office and to talk to me, but I was on the House floor at the time, and he told my staff to tell me that he had gotten my note and how much he appreciated it and thanked me for it. Then he turned around and voted.
Yeah.
Oh, well. The card wasn't to influence his vote, but maybe it kind of was, because I said, I trusted you. What did I mean when I say I trust you? Usually when you say I trust you to do something, you need to do what I want you to do, right? So those are two of the historic things that we did this past session, was impeachment and expulsion. Thank you for having me today. I hope the information was helpful to you. If it wasn't helpful, then at other times I try to be entertaining at least.
Well, I just want to say thank you for coming, and certainly watch our social media. Our website is LWV, as in Victor Irving, all one word, .org. And that's where we have lots of information about voting and how you can get access to polling locations and the sample ballot, but also our programs, our monthly programs. So watch for that. Watch for the fact we're going to have our campaign forums, candidate forums, I should say, in February and in April. So again, thank you for coming, and thank you, Terry, so much for braving the weather and coming back from Austin. I know you're exhausted, but we appreciate it so much. All right, thank you again. Enjoy more food. Come cook with me.